My story continued in the subtle shift of seasons. Winter arrived with a bitter cold that seeped into the bones of my small apartment. The holidays passed in a strange dual reality. There were moments of piercing loneliness watching the snow fall on silent evenings. There were also moments of unexpected grace. My son made a paper chain countdown for both homes, a rainbow of construction paper links. His insistence on this symmetry taught me about a child's need for balance. My daughter began writing stories on my laptop, tales of brave girls who lived in tree houses. Her characters always had 2 homes and magical pets. I read them with a lump in my throat, recognizing her processing this new world. I started a ritual of my own. Every Sunday night, I lit a cinnamon candle and wrote 3 things that did not hurt. The grocery clerk remembered my name. The way sunlight hit the kitchen wall at 3 p.m. The weight of my sleeping cat on my feet. This list was my anchor, a deliberate turning toward the light. It was not denial, it was survival. I was training my eyes to see life beyond the crack in my foundation. The legal process grinded on an endless machine of documents. Each form was a reminder of the bureaucracy of broken hearts. I spent evenings sorting bank statements from years past. The numbers told a story of shared goals, a down payment for a house, savings for college. Now they told a story of division. My lawyer, a patient woman with a steady voice, explained terms like mediation and equitable distribution. These words felt like tools for dismantling a memory. I signed my name until it became a meaningless scratching. I learned to breathe through the meetings, to picture myself as a business dissolving a failed partnership. The emotional detachment was a shield. I wore it clumsily, but it protected the raw places. Then came the first major holiday. The children were with their father. Christmas morning in my apartment was preternaturally quiet. I made coffee and sat by the window. The silence was a physical presence. I let the sadness wash over me, a clean, honest wave. I did not fight it. I simply said hello to it and allowed it to be. An hour later, I dressed and drove to a local soup kitchen. I had signed up to volunteer months before as a defiant act against self-pity. I spent the day ladling gravy and smiling at strangers. An elderly man called me darling and told me about Christmases during the war. A young mother thanked me with tired eyes. In the act of serving, the hollow place inside me filled with a different kind of warmth. I had feared being alone. Instead, I had found connection in the most unlikely place. I drove home that night, exhausted but whole. The apartment was still quiet, but the silence now felt peaceful, earned. I had survived the day, and in surviving I had begun to change its meaning. Winter turned to spring, a slow thaw. The ice on the pavement melted into murky puddles. I felt a similar melting within myself. The permafrost of my grief began to soften. One Saturday, I tackled the last of the boxes labeled storage. I had been avoiding it, a carton of unprocessed pain. Inside were wedding photos, letters from our early years, a dried boutonniere. I sat on the floor of the closet, surrounded by these artifacts of a dead civilization. I expected a torrent of tears. Instead, I felt a curious detachment. The girl in those photos with the hopeful smile and the untouched heart, she was a stranger to me. I had lived a lifetime since then. I carefully sorted the items into 3 piles. One pile for my children to have one day, a piece of their history. One pile for discretion, a quiet disposal of intimate promises. One very small pile to keep a single photo of us laughing on a beach, the sun young on our faces. I did not keep it to mourn, I kept it to honor the truth that once long ago we had tried. This was perhaps the most powerful act of restoration yet. I was not destroying the past, I was curating it. I was deciding what deserved to take up space in my future. But before we continue, I want to extend a very special invitation to you: subscribe the channel and leave a like. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories, and comment down below which city you are watching us from right now. Let's continue. With the physical clutter cleared, a new mental space opened. The therapy sessions grew deeper. We began to explore not just the end of the marriage, but its beginning. I saw patterns, my tendency to shrink to accommodate, my fear of conflict mistaken for peace. I saw how I had handed over the map to my life, letting someone else chart the course. My therapist asked a revolutionary question: "What do you want for dinner?" It seemed so simple. But for years dinner had been a negotiation, a pleasing and accommodation. That night I made spicy lentil soup, a dish he had never liked. I ate it at the kitchen counter reading a novel. The spice was on my tongue, the story was in my mind. The experience was entirely and unapologetically mine. It was a tiny rebellion, a silent declaration of sovereignty. My social world had shrunk to a dot. Many couple friends had faded away, my presence now an uncomfortable reminder of fracture. The invitations dwindled, then stopped. The loneliness of this was a particular ache. I felt like a ghost in my old neighborhood. One day I saw a former friend at the pharmacy. We made stilted conversation, her eyes flicking to her ring finger. The chasm between us was wide and full of unspoken things. I walked away feeling invisible. But that afternoon I did something new. I looked up a class at the community center. A Thursday night pottery workshop for beginners. My hands shook as I registered. Walking into that room the following week felt like jumping off a cliff. The other women were of all ages, some with wedding bands, some without. We were united not by our relationship status, but by our clumsy attempts to center clay. The mess was glorious. My first bowl was lopsided, the walls uneven. I laughed a real guttural laugh that surprised me. It had been so long since I had made something so honestly imperfect. I took the crooked bowl home and put it on the windowsill. It held nothing but light. It was perfect. The children were navigating their own rough waters. My son had nights of stubborn anger, throwing toys, refusing to listen. My daughter became a little mother, too careful, too quiet. I learned to sit with their big feelings without rushing to fix them. I would say, "I see you are angry, that is okay." Or, "It makes sense you feel sad, I feel sad sometimes too." This was perhaps the hardest work. To hold their pain alongside my own without collapsing. We established new rituals. Pizza and movie night on Fridays with no phones allowed. Sunday morning pancakes in the shape of animals. A shared journal where we could write or draw anything we could not say aloud. One night my son drew a picture of a house with 2 doors. He wrote, "This is my family, it is big." I cried then, but they were healing tears. We were not broken, we were redefining. Spring bloomed into full-blown summer. The heat was kind. I started running early in the morning before the world was awake. The rhythm of my feet on the pavement became a meditation. I ran past houses still dark with sleep. I felt a fierce communion with the sleeping world. I was awake, I was moving, I was breathing. One morning I ran uphill, a route that used to defeat me. My lungs burned, my legs screamed. But I did not stop. I reached the top and turned to face the spreading sunrise. The sky was a riot of orange and pink. I spread my arms wide and let the sun warm my face. In that moment I was not a divorced woman. I was not a single mother. I was not a victim of a story that ended. I was a force of nature standing at the summit of her own life. The joy that rose in me was startling in its intensity. It was mine earned through sweat and solitude. I carried that sunrise inside me for days. The financial anxiety was a constant companion, but I was learning its language. I created a budget with color-coded spreadsheets. I celebrated tiny victories, paying off a small credit card, finding a perfect couch at a thrift store. I learned the difference between want and need. The want was for security, for a cushion against the world. The need was for food, shelter, and the occasional ice cream cone with my children. I found a side job editing manuscripts from home. It tapped into a part of my brain that had long been dormant. I lost myself in other people's sentences for hours. The work made me feel capable, intellectual, useful beyond the domestic sphere. My first paycheck, direct deposited, felt like a medal of honor. I took my children out for burgers with my earnings. "This is from Mom's new work," I said. They clapped as if I had won a Nobel Prize. Their pride was a balm more soothing than any praise from a partner had ever been. Summer brought the first official vacation as a family of 3. We rented a small cabin by a lake. The drive was long, the car packed to the brim. There were no arguments over directions, no tension over the radio station. We sang loudly and off-key. We stopped at roadside stands for cherries and pecans. The cabin was rustic with a porch that swayed. We swam in the icy lake water. We built elaborate sandcastles that the waves would claim. One evening, as we roasted marshmallows, my daughter looked at me. "Mom," she said, "this is fun." Her simple declaration was a symphony. It was proof that joy could grow in the cleared space of our loss. We were not a less family, we were a different family. And different could be good, could be real, could be filled with sticky fingers and sunset silences. Returning home felt different. The apartment was not just a place to endure, it was a place to live. I had brought the lake light back with me in my heart. I began to paint the beige walls. I chose a color called sea glass for the living room, a soft, soothing green-blue. The act of painting was transformative. I covered the neutral landlord hues with a color that spoke to my soul. I moved furniture by myself, scraping the floor in the process. I hung pictures not of a generic past, but of our present. A photo of the kids at the lake, the clay bowl from my Class A press flower from a hike. My home began to reflect the woman I was becoming, not the woman I had been. As autumn approached, the divorce papers were finalized. The court date arrived. I dressed in a simple blue dress, not the color of sadness, but of sky and depth. My lawyer met me at the courthouse steps. The building was imposing, all stone and weighty history. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. The judge, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, ran through the formalities. Her voice was a monotone recitation of the end. When she pronounced the dissolution, it was not with a bang but a whisper. "Estampe à signature." It was done. I walked out into the September sunlight. The world looked precisely the same. Cars passed, people hurried by with coffee. Yet everything was different. I was no longer married. The legal tie was severed. I sat on a bench outside and let the reality settle. I expected to feel devastation or perhaps elation. Instead, I felt a profound quiet. A chapter had officially closed. The book remained in my hands. I was the author now. The blank pages stretched before me, both terrifying and beautiful. This is where the true restoration work truly took hold. The external process was complete. The internal rebuilding was my lifelong task. I began to understand that restoration is not about returning to a former self. That self was gone, irrevocably changed by the fire. Restoration is about assembling a mosaic from the shattered pieces. The new picture would be different. It would have cracks and lines of gold where the breaks had been sealed. It would tell a story of survival, of alchemy, of turning pain into strength. My journey was far from over. There would be days when the grief would resurface, a ghost in the daylight. There would be challenges, co-parenting disagreements, financial strains, lonely evenings. But I had proof now. Proof I could sit with sadness and not drown. Proof I could create joy from simple moments. Proof I could stand on my own 2 feet, even when they trembled. The brave woman in the mirror was emerging. She was tender and tough. She was weary and hopeful. She was a work in progress, and she was enough.